Hey, what's up, guys? It's Max for this edition of Soul Food. I've been thinking this week about the idea of imitation. And as we kind of reflect on another year of ministry that's gone by, more and more just realizing that the greatest way that we help students to follow Jesus is by inviting them to follow us, to take a look and see it at the way that we live, how we follow Jesus, how we deal with life, how we deal with suffering. And I think that are some of the most powerful lessons that we teach, even when we don't intend to. And in the book of 1 Thessalonians, Paul writes, he says, "You know how we lived among you for your sake." You know, he's saying, you guys are aware of how we lived. And then he says, "You became imitators of us and of the Lord. And in spite of severe suffering, you welcomed the message with the joy given by the Holy Spirit. And so you became a model to all the believers in Macedonia and Achaia." You know, he says, as a result of these believers following Paul's example, they became examples to follow. And that's what we want for students, is for them to be examples of Christ, to be the salt of the world on their campus, in their families. And it shows us here that this begins when we live lives that we can invite students to imitate. You know, Paul also simply said, "Follow me as I follow Jesus." You know, I don't know about you, but that's a pretty confident statement. But it's something that I would invite us to consider this week. And I'm reading this book called The Ministry of Nurture by a guy named Duffy Robbins, who was a summer camp speaker for us a few years ago. And he offers 3 questions I think it would be good for us to think about as we consider this idea of imitating. And so I have 3 questions to share with you. The first is, if my students were exactly like me, how would they be most like Jesus? And then if my students were exactly like me, how would they be least like Jesus? And then finally, what am I teaching my students about a Christian lifestyle by my model? So if my students were like me, how would they be like Jesus? How would they not be like Jesus? And what am I teaching my students about how to live as a follower of Christ? So I want to invite you and invite myself to consider those questions this week. And my prayer for you and for me is that we would live lives that we could invite people to imitate, not to make clones, but to make followers of Jesus. So I pray that blesses you this week, praying for you guys, and I'll talk to you soon. All right.